A new month means a new tier list, especially after a pretty decently sized patch that added a new objective. My name is Doug Films, the current team analyst for Rose Syndicate, and the Deadlock ranked Deadlock player, and today we're going to be going over the power ranking of all of the characters in Deadlock currently. And if you like this type of content or want to see more, do me a favor, hit that like button, of course subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment down below what characters or videos you would like to see about next. And per usual, I'm going to go through all of the reasons why I'm putting characters in said roles. Alright, so let's get started and talk about this tier list. Like always, my tier list typically left to right order doesn't matter, but I think for this time I am going to do that because it's really hard to classify different characters because there's not any specific role. Alright, so let's go ahead and do our tier list. Like I said, typically I don't do my tier list left to right, especially in a game like Deadlock because there isn't really specific roles, but I think for this instance I am going to be doing it because some of the power rankings do matter quite a bit. And like I said, this is the Earn/King of the Hill update where we're looking at the Rift and everything like that. But let's get started with Abrams. So Abrams, he got some changes where his Siphon Life Tier 3 was reduced from 3 meters to 2, and the Soldier Charge Tier 3 reduced from -20 to -18, so he gets this off cooldown a little bit faster. Overall, not a lot of the things have really changed with Abrams. He still is one of the, I guess, better frontlines in the entire game. Some of the interesting things though to look at is the reworked boon reward table. So it takes longer to get your boons and rank up. Because of that, characters that have a lot of HP, especially because the health per boon was reduced by 5%. Abrams has the Siphon Life, or his tier 3, or his third ability, sorry. So I think he sits around the A tier, super high A tier, at least for me. Again, he is pretty consistent in terms of the meta. I think there's a lot of cases where you want to play this character for the most part. He's a really solid frontline in comparison to, you know, Billy, Shiv, or any of the other frontliners in that regard. So I still think he sits around the A tier. He could be seen as an S tier character, but for right now, for this tier list, I'm just placing him at the A tier. Moving on to Apollo. So I am still a big believer on Apollo, and that's because they did a ton of changes to this character for this Rift update. The tier 1 riposte got a whole bunch of changes, plus advanced heal. On heroes hit spirit scaling was increased from 1 to 1.3. Telio's Sun tier 3 increased from +40 to +50 damage, and his gun scales really well. You've been seeing him played a lot more in scrims and even night shift as of recently. I think this character excels in a lot of different, mainly just trying to win your lane and trying to go for an early snowball. Unlike some of the other characters, I think this character still is really good. I might put him B, I might put him A tier. I think people are still trying to figure out how to properly play this character now. I think there's a lot of cases where this character finds a lot of use and it can be adapted to a lot of different team compositions. But in terms of just normal MM, it might be a little bit harder to get a perfect understanding because there's a lot of ways to shut down this character. But I think in a setting when you have picks and bans like Night Shift or Scrims or whatever the case you might be doing, he sees a lot more value and a lot more play because you don't have to worry about a lot of the counters to this character. I think he's probably just in the middle right now. He is definitely strong, don't get me wrong. This plus 50% here is insane. And I think just overall, his riposte getting this much love is really nice to the character. Also, he does a lot more health on hero hit, spirit scaling from 1 to 1.3, like I've been saying. But like I said, I think this character is good. He's not terrible, he's not bad, but he's not like absurdly strong as he once was before. So I think he sits around the B tier, at least for me. And yes, this is a duck. And like I said, in, you know, just like any game, I think all of the characters in this game can be used in any way, shape, or form. I think every single character is playable. I just think some characters might be more favored than others, but I digress. For Bebop, I believe this patch didn't really receive any changes. Yeah, he didn't receive any changes, but I do see this character starting to struggle to get a lot of use out. Mainly, people are playing him bomb now. You can still play him gun, don't get me wrong, but I still think he struggles a lot more, so I think I'm going to be putting him down to the C tier. I think in terms of pick characters, you have better options. You have pick characters such as Holiday, Paradox, Lash if you want to go that route, Doorman. That's basically do Bebop's job a little bit better. Maybe not so much Lash, because he mainly relies on his ultimate, and that's a longer cooldown than a hook. But when you think about characters like Doorman, Holiday, Paradox, like with same, they shine a lot more than Bebop. So I think putting Bebop in C is fair. But like I said, I can see the use of this character being a lot higher. But I think right now, in terms of the current power ranking, I think C is a fair spot to put him. And I understand why people might want to move him up, or maybe might want to even move him down, but I think C, like I said, is fair. So Billy is an interesting one. I think Billy is still very good. So Billy got bullet damage per boon reduced by 10%, bash down melee scaling reduced from 1.1 to 0.9, bash tier 3 reduced from 60% heavy melee to 50%. Tier 3 max HP reduced from 10 to 8, and the spirit scaling, however, was increased from 0.017 to 0.034. However, they break even at 111 spirit power, so his tier 3 max HP is a little bit better. I think this character, despite these changes, is still arguably one of the best frontliners. It's mainly because of his chain gang ultimate ability, which is just a really good team fight. And from my understanding right now of the current meta, it's right now where you have your M1 just constantly farming. Let me pull this up. Basically, you have your M1 just always farming equals farm. And then you have essentially 5 people just running around the map together, looking for fights and doing whatever. Because there's a lot of downtime right now in between Rift, Earn, and mid-boss or other objectives. So you're literally just grouping as 5 and just running around the map from my perspective, is what I'm noticing in like Eternus. From Eternus 6 to lower levels. That's just kind of how the game is played now. It's a little weird, but it's understandably so. I rate Billy extremely high still. I think he sits around A. He could still be perceived as one of the best frontliners in the game. Could even arguably put him in the S tier category. But for right now, I'm going to put him A. Like I said, I might move him a little bit later on in the video, in my last section where I do my final changes. But this is probably what I'm thinking. Then moving on to Calico. So Calico didn't receive really any changes. She did receive a change in the previous patch, not the Rift one, but the previous one, to where she gets some buffs to her ultimate and her Ava form. But some things to keep in mind is that Scourge was slightly changed. You have your max DPS reduced from 3.5 to 2.6. That's not really what matters. The big thing is the max health DPS scales now with Spirit Power, which is really good. You still buy this item on pretty much all the characters that can buy this item, but you might want to prioritize some other items over others. I think this character is still S tier, maybe even Visc in my opinion, but probably sitting S tier. Visc is like best in slot, is what I used to do with my rivals tier list. Like I said, I don't think this game really has specific roles. It has sub roles where you have frontline, you have your your M1s, you have your flex M1s or your position 2 characters. But I still think this character is really high regarded. But I'm probably gonna look at S here, at least my personal opinion. So moving on to Celeste. So Celeste got a ton of buffs. Dazzling Trick, Radiant Daggers buff, duration, spirit scaling increase. Like, this is overall just insane buffs to this character. I think this character, if you get ahead, is very devastating. That being said, a lot of characters ahead can do a ton of damage. But I think this character is so in a lot of different situations. But I think the meta is so reliant on a lot of tankiness. In fact, this character struggles to find some identity. But I think with the buffs that was received, she's just very good right now. I just haven't been seeing her played a lot in scrims, because there's a lot of different priorities of that you just want characters that can really just hard farm. Those are characters, you have characters like, Vendor, your Mirage, your Mina, your off carry roles. I think Celeste has a little bit of an identity crisis to where she can't necessarily find the right way she wants to play the game. But I think with the buffs, she is still, in my opinion, a very highly rated character. But yeah, that's probably what I'm thinking. I think that's fair. And like I said, if you have your own, comments, opinions on my tier list, like always, feel free. You're more than welcome to comment down below. I'd love to hear your opinion, because at the end of the day, tier lists are all opinion based and biased, and it's just completely how you perceive the game. But this is kind of what I'm thinking. So moving on to Doorman. The Doorman, I think Doorman got like a small change. Doorway cooldown increased from 40 seconds to 45. None of his damage or anything like that was changed, or any of his other cooldowns. Some of the boons got changed. I mean, I guess the Mystic Shot, you know, item that he likes to buy, got a little bit of a change, nothing crazy. I think the big thing though is the boon, this whole reworked boon system, which is pretty important. And if I pull something else up, courtesy to Lightbringer, pull up this, you know, I mean, if you look at Doorman, he still does pretty good for the most part. I think in a lot of regard, he's still played quite consistently. I think he's a highly ranked character. I wouldn't necessarily put him BIS or S. I think he's in a decent spot around the A tier. I don't like putting a ton of characters in S tier or BIS, and I don't like putting a lot of characters in D tier, because I think every single character is playable in different situations. But I think in MM, it's a little more coin flippy, and it just really depends on what's going on for the most part. So I think Doorman is still a super reliable character in most ways, but I think A is fine for me. Then moving on to so like I said, moving on to the Drifter. So if you look at Stat Locker, you see he's, you know, regarded quite high as of June 29th. Recent. He has a pretty positive win rate, one of the highest win rates around, because the character creates a lot of chaos. It can be a pretty good character. He's one of those characters that essentially infinitely scale, and I mean that because he builds stacks, and characters that do stacks scale relatively well. So characters like Drifter, like Talon, like Vindicta, if you want to even put her up there, I think Vindicta is very good. It's one of those characters that infinitely scale. And I think because of the boon changes, again, looking at the boon changes, games are technically, or now, lasting a lot longer because of this boon change. And if games are lasting longer, that means characters like Drifter, Talon, Vindicta, characters that build stacks, see a lot more higher priority, and just will overall deal a lot more damage because, well, like I said, games are going longer, so they're building a lot more stacks, resulting in them doing a ton more damage. Me, in my opinion, these characters excel a lot more. So I think this character, for right now, I'm putting them in the A tier. I'll worry about left to right and rearranging the order later, but I think for right now, I can definitely see him just straight up putting A or even S tier. Maybe even BIS in my opinion, but I think right now, A is fine. But at least that's what I'm thinking. So moving on to Dynamo. Now, personally, I think Dynamo's a really good character. I have friends that play Dynamo, and pretty much if I'm playing with them, we always win the game. Because Dynamo is a super situational character, but it's a very coin flip character because you have to understand his ultimate is pretty much his only source of impact throughout the entire match. Yes, his healing aura, his quantum entanglement is very good, especially max rank because it cleanses. And his one, just the pulse, does a ton of damage and is a useful crowd control ability. But the issue is you have to have the right team composition, and you have to be understanding that if you're playing against characters like Sinclair, Lash, or whatever the case may be, it's going to be hard for Dynamo to get value until he buys Unstoppable. But that being said, I think this character is a super situational pick. So put D/situational. I'll just put /sit. Super situational character to where the character was reliant on a lot of different factors that may come up. So I think putting Dynamo in this category is perfectly fine. So I think for right now, putting them D/situational is fine, at least in my opinion. But like I said, you can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Now, I hate doing this, but if you haven't done so already, please do me a huge favor of hitting that like button. It's one of the best ways of just helping out the channel. And if you want some coaching or, you know, want to check out some other types of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Even consider joining my Discord and definitely checking out all the other socials. Like I said, I don't like the double plug, but definitely consider checking out the channel if you're new here. I like to try to make, you know, decent, you know, enjoyable content, maybe content that can help you learn and understand Deadlock a little bit more. So definitely check out the channel. But moving on to Graves. So Graves is in a interesting predicament because again we have the rework of the boons. The character is another one of those I guess snowbally S characters, to where if this character is behind early game, it just feels miserable throughout the entire match. And if you're strong early, the character proceedingly, just gets more annoying to deal with because the character is going to be constantly split pushing, and this is all around going to be a non-enjoyable experience for yourself. However, because Mirage is such a high priority pick right now, a lot of people are playing him, I think Graves loses a lot of value because you have a character that wants to split push the entire time. And then if you're playing against a Mirage on the enemy team, this character is basically your anti-split push character, or even your split push character. He will constantly be in the lane that the Graves is trying to split push to counteract, and this character loses a tremendous amount of value. So I think it's fair to put this character in F. I don't think this character is relatively good right now. Like I said, there is a lot of circumstances to where, she gets a lot of value and whatnot, but the best way to shut down this character is to literally kill her ghouls, destroy her skulls, dodge her, her line, her stun ability, and destroy her ultimate. It's pretty much easier said than done, but I think this character, for reference, is not necessarily the best, but even though they're in the F category, I don't think she's completely unplayable and unviable. She is useful in certain scenarios, like I've been preaching the entire time, but I think putting her in the F tier is fine, at least for me. So moving on to Grey Talon. So I think Grey Talon is still a high up character. So Rain of Arrows cooldown increased from 23 seconds to 25, nothing too big. Grey Talon, Guided Owl, permanent spirit bonus reduced from 10 to 8. So losing 2 spirit power overall, nothing crazy. I think this character is still super high up in terms of like how good the character is, because like I said, again, what I've been saying is that now because you have the boon system, taking more boons to level up, you're gonna have the games going on longer, and when games are going on longer, they have a higher chance of generating more stacks, therefore generating more damage overall, and it's being more of a presence. Also, you have a global execution ult, so I think regardless, this character will always be way up until they actually change the numbers on the owl correctly, or just change the overall spirit damage in general. I wouldn't even have mind if they went from 10 to 5 spirit power, but I think dropping it down by 2 is also good. But I think the character is just in a very solid state that's going to be hard to get, not get any value out of this character. So I think putting this character A tier is perfectly fine. So moving on to Haze. So Haze Haze got some direct changes. Most of these were just buffs for the most part. We have Sleep Dagger tier 1 increase from minus 8% bullet res to minus 10. Sleep Dagger tier 2 increase from minus 17 to minus 18. And in Smoke Bomb tier 3 increase from plus 40% lifesteal to plus 50. This to me is pretty much a nothing burger. This doesn't really change anything about how the character operates. More or less, you want to be looking at this item right here, where its Curse Relic damage penalty went from minus 10 to minus 14, which is a pretty big change. It's a 4% change, so you're inherently going to be doing a lot less damage now, because typically when you're playing Haze, you're playing for the ult build. If you're not really playing for the ult build, you're not playing the character right, in my opinion. I think this character is another case of situational, because you have to have a lot of factors in the lobby. Once people start buying metal skin, this character loses all of its value, because you have to build curse and just only look for that only. I think, again, she's still super useful in certain scenarios. She's a pick heavy character where you're just going invis, looking for your pick with curse, and just ulting the one person. So if you're trying to shut down one person, this character is really good for that. But I think outside of that, it's hard for this character to get a lot of value, because you have so many characters. CC, 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 crowd control, crowd control, crowd control, crowd control, can escape, really good counter to this character. So I think the characters at the top counter this character way too hard for her to get any value. So I think putting her, relatively low is a smart idea, or it makes sense. But like I said, you can let me know what you think in the comments down below. At least for me, this is kind of where she's feeling like. So moving on to Holiday. So Holiday got some changes. If I go to them, so Powder Cake velocity was slightly reduced, so they send out, slower. Charge delay was increased from 7 seconds to 7.5. Spirit scaling was reduced from 1.4 to 1.2. Powder Cake tier 3 reduced from plus 100 to plus 80. The character overall is still very good in my opinion. It's still useful for the situations that you want to get picks, you want to do a lot of spirit damage, and you want to just, be a nuisance all over the map. However, I think this change right here does hurt her kill pressure in lane a little bit. She's not necessarily going to be like one-shotting you right away in lane. She's going to, whittle you down, then kill you. So you're losing that, I guess, super aggressive playstyle she once had. But don't get me wrong, the character is still amazing, still fantastic, can still rack up a ton of damage. You're still seeing her played in Night Shift, you're still seeing her played in scrims, and I know for sure I'm still seeing her in my Eternus ranked games, and this character still gets a ton of value. To whether she's, in the S tier category anymore, definitely not the case, but I think for reference, this character has fallen off just a slight touch. But I think the character still sees a tremendous amount of value, at least in my opinion. Moving on to Infernus. So I don't believe Infernus got any changes. No, not this recent patch at all. However, something that did get a change is an item he likes to buy for the most part, if you are building, gun, is Toxic Bullets. The bleed damage was increased from 1.7 to 1.9. Now, the interesting thing about this character is that the this character's one ability, not the afterburn, actually this scales all of your damage up. So building Toxic Bullets is really good. That's why you also go like Headhunter and others, because you just get so much value from the Molotov, the Napalm. I think this character is really good for another, I guess, position 2 character. Position 1 is your M1 carries. Position 2 is a character that wants to get farm after your position 1. So I think pairing this with a character like Venator, like Warden, like Wraith is really good. And I think this character gets a lot of value now. So I'm going to go ahead and put him like around the B tier category for right now. I'll probably move him around once I move some of these. But for right now, I think this character is, in my opinion, really highly sought after, especially in scrims, depending on, different bans and whatnot. Moving on to Ivy. I'm a big fan of Ivy. I like Ivy a lot. I think Ivy is really good. And she did get some buffs. Intimidating Throw and Spirit Scaring was increased. Connection and Replicated Healing per boon was also increased. Airdrop cooldown reduction when used on allies was also increased. So, buffs, inherently buffs, so really good. I think this character is probably around the B tier now, in my opinion. I still think she's a really good support, or even if you want to build her more damage focused, or if you want to go for like a Phantom Strike melee build, that is still certainly possible. I think the character is in a relatively good state to pretty much build it however you want for the most part. I would lean less away from this straight gun and try to do a gun support hybrid build, but you can still build full gun. That's the the joy of this game, is that you can build pretty much every character however you want, although there are some builds that are a lot better than the others, of course. But I think this character is still in a relatively good spot. So I think putting her in the C tier, or sorry, the B tier, in the middle is perfectly fine. So moving on to Kelvin. So I don't think Kelvin got any changes, no, but he still is relatively good in my eyes. Still a decent support. Again, like I said, with the health per boon was reduced, so this character, I guess with the Frost Grenade heal, gets a lot more value in my eyes, because you're going to be healing for more right away. So if you're building the character support, this character gets a lot of stocks in my opinion. But if you're building the character more reliant on damage, I don't think this character gets too much praise, because I think you just have better options in terms of your spirit nuker damage from other characters than picking Kelvin. Yes, there are certain ways that Kelvin can get a tremendous amount of value. Look, his Frost Grenade is good, his Dome is still good, his Path is still good, his Beam is all good, all of his abilities are great. However, I think there's just better options for his specific role depending on how you want to play it. If you're building support, you have better characters like Paige, like Rem, like even Ivy, for example. But in terms of spirit nukers, you have, way better options like Mina, Lash, Infernus, Apollo. You have better options. So I think putting Kelvin towards the C tier is fine in my opinion. But I think if you still want to play this character, there's nothing wrong with that. Lady Geist. So Lady Geist didn't really receive any changes, I don't believe. No, she didn't receive any changes. Like I said, we're looking at the boons, the souls required. I think this character is a really good M1 right now. She does a lot of damage, and because of some of these changes, she gets even more value. I think this character rises in stock because you have a lot of people picking a lot more tanky characters. Characters like Abrams, like Billy. I mean, I guess characters like even Mo, for example, or Shiv. Characters that want to buy a lot of HP items. A character like Geist and items like Scourge go up in value because of how reliant they are in all of this. So I think Geist is a really solid M1 pick right now. I think this character goes around the A tier, I would say. Yeah, like A tier. Moving on to Lash. I think Lash is still a really good pick. I don't think there's a reason why he's not a good pick. So if I come here, he got a little change where his ground strike cooldown was reduced from 21 to 18. Fog angle increased from 30 to 38, so you have a better angle now to do more damage. A lot of people are building, like, there's two builds. You're either going like a magic carpet rush into spirit burn boundless rush, or you're just building him carry gun with siphon bullets, which is also still really viable and still really good. I don't think any of the changes really affect him negatively or positively. I would say more positively, of course, because they're buffs. But I think the character still remains in the A tier, especially with the meta, especially with, you know, fighting for the rift and fighting in the open. Having that Lash ult is very nice. So I think A is probably around where he should be placed. For McGinnis, I don't believe got any changes, at least this patch. But I think with the boon changes, it's nice to have, and the health per boon reduced, I think it's nice to have the McGinnis's heal earlier, because it's nice to have that extra healing because of the health per boon was reduced. So I think this character sits around like the BC tier, maybe B tier, I would say, at least in my opinion. She still does a lot of damage, especially at the rift fights because it's open. Having the unstoppable ult right away is really nice. Most builds are good different ways, so that's probably where I would put her in my opinion. Maybe she might lean more towards the C tier because there's just a lot better options than this character. You also have a lot of items and abilities that shut down this character. When you think of characters in this tier, you have a ton of characters that just shut down this character, and it's really hard for McGinnis to get a lot of value because you just have, again, you just have characters that do her job a lot better. You have a Lash, you have like a Holiday where you have consistent annoying damage, where McGinnis, she has her turrets, she has her ultimate, but I'd much rather have a Lash ultimate. I mean, I'm pretty sure a majority of people would much rather have a Lash ultimate than have a McGinnis ultimate. So I think it's just one of those scenarios where a lot of the characters in the higher, I guess, tier outshine McGinnis. Don't get me wrong, McGinnis can still get a ton of value, but I think these characters just, you know, are just way better than her, unfortunately, if that makes sense. So moving on to Mina. So I think Mina's really good right now, mainly because the health per boon was reduced by 5%. So Mina's going to be getting a lot more value now because of her rake ability, and she just got buffed overall. So if we look at Mina, we see rake missing health as damage increase from 5 to 6, which is really good because everyone inherently has lower HP, right? Everybody has lower HP. So this is just a lot better now because of that change. Her tier 3 bats has plus 3 meters range. Her Nox Nostra, her ultimate, damage was increased from 4.45 to 4.6, which is a really nice buff. And then Nox Nostra tier 1 damage increased from 1.7 to 1.9, which is also really nice. Like I said, again, the reason why this character is really good right now is because the overall health of everybody in the game went down. And because of the rake missing health as damage was increased from 5 to 6, her rake is going to be hitting for even harder now. That's why this character is seeing a lot of play and a lot of value now. So this character is probably sitting around the A tier again. Maybe before, in the most, you know, a patch before this, she might have been down a couple of steps. But I think right now, sitting her at the A tier is very fine. So moving on to Mirage. Now, Mirage didn't really get any changes this patch, but Mirage is just really good in general in my eyes. I really like playing Mirage. He gets a ton of value. He's essentially your macro fixer. He will TP to lanes, fix your waves, and he still has a ton of carry potential. However, if you are rushing Echo Shard on this character, you are dumb. I hate to admit it. Do not rush Echo Shard. If you're rushing Echo Shard, you're not getting value out of this character. Even though it might seem like you're getting a ton of value because, oh, you have a ton of CC, you are inherently nerfing yourself. This character does a ton of damage. And if you rush Echo Shard, you're losing a ton of damage and value from this character. Echo Shard, if you want to buy it, should be like one of your last items in general, because there's just so many better items you should be buying before Echo Shard. You just need more damage because you want to get damage out of this character. This character acts as a pretty decent carry. The faster you can get this character online doing damage, the overall better chance you have of winning the game. As this character, kind of, if he's not ahead and he's not, up to speed of the other carries, it's hard for him to get value. Trust me, it's really easy to see when you watch scrims and you watch Night Shift. When people buy Echo Shard, it's just a really bad idea. Now, I will say this. You see sometimes in Night Shift, people getting value out of the Echo Shard rush. It's mainly because people don't know how to play against the Echo Shard and the Tornado Rush. So, I'm really highly against rushing that. But I think in terms of power ranking, I'll put this character in A tier right now. So moving on to Mohammed and Kareem. So with Mo and Krill, when I go to changes, you see a Sandblast tier 3 slow increase from -25 to -30%. Sandblast tier 3 increase from -20 to -25. And the combo bonus max health per kill was increased from 30 + 1 to 40 + 2, which is a tremendous big change. Especially because of the changes they did, like I keep referencing, with the boons. This character gets a lot more value, so I think I put him in the B tier, maybe even A tier. I would put B tier at least. So Paige, I think Paige finds a lot of value now. Again, like I said, you have the boon change, but with Paige, when we go to the changes, we see all the buffs and changes she got. Her shield scaling got a lot better, her barrier got better, fire rate got better, health per boon got better, especially with the boon. Especially with that health per boon going down, this character is inherently better because she has more max HP now. And overall, everything is a lot better with this character. I think this character goes from, down here, probably to around the B tier. This character is very good in my opinion, especially in the support category. I think this character gets a lot of value where other characters don't get value anymore. But I think the issue with this character is that it's inherently really easy to dive a character like Paige because she is significantly weak in trying to defend herself. Yes, she can shield herself and do whatever, but if you're able to dive onto this character and get her out of the equation, she loses a ton of value. That's why you usually focus supports first in team fights, because once this character is out of the question, you have all of your stocks on the rest of your damage just doing a billion damage. It's just like any other hero shooter, you prioritize supports, and then you go to, DPS to tanks and whatnot. So the faster you get out of the equation, a lot better. She is really easy to dive and kill for the most part if the enemy team isn't paying attention to her, but that doesn't mean her value drops at all. So I think she still sits around the B tier, at least for me. Maybe A tier, but definitely B. Moving on to Paradox. So Paradox got a little change. Kinetic Carbine tier 2 now increases move speed, Spirit Scaling 0.06. Tier 3 changed from affecting max damage scaling to affecting both min and max damage scaling, so inherently 2 decent buffs to Paradox. I think overall this character is very good. She's just in the same boat where she's a pick character. She's good in certain scenarios, not necessarily others. I think you are better off picking a character like Holiday, like Lash, like Doorman, than picking Paradox. I think this character has lost a little bit of value, and I think you just have better options than Paradox for your pick category. So I think, sitting around the B tier is still fine in my opinion. I think, like I said, you just have better options. So B tier is fine for me. On to Pocket. So Pocket is still probably one of the most picked and banned characters around. I go to win rate. You can see like Pocket isn't necessarily all the way up, because if I come down, you can see his pick rate, which is so funny to me. This is pick rate, right? Yeah, 20%. Mainly because this character is permanently banned all the time. And I think people are just not playing this character right. I think Affliction is still one of the strongest abilities in the entire game. And I think this character is probably S tier, maybe A tier in my opinion. still a super sought after character. Like I said, you're either picking this character or either banning him. In a lot of the scrims I watch, it's the same case: pick, ban. And Deadlock Night Shift, it's either pick, ban. And in high MMR, high elo ranks, it's the same case: pick, ban. If you're playing it, usually they're winning because Affliction is such a strong ability. But I think a lot of people kind of mess up with how to play this character. But yeah, that's probably where I'm thinking. S tier is still fine to me. So moving on to Rem. So Rem is an interesting one. So tag-along healing per little second spirit scaling. Oh my god, words are hard. Reduced from 0.66 to 0.44. So the healing got nerfed a little bit. The tag-along tier 3 missing health spirit scaling was reduced from 0.02 to 0.016, so nerfed a little bit. However, Little Helper's resist reduced from 15 to 12, but Little Helper's tier 1 changed from +1 helper to +1 helper and plus 1.5 movement speed, which is really good. Also, tier 2 changed from, this to +1 helper plus 50% damage trooper resist, which is really good. And for tier 3, it went from 2 helpers to +1 helper and plus 15 spirit res, which is just really good. Overall, Rem is still a very good character, still a highly sought after pick. I think this character still sits around the S tier character or category, at least in my opinion. And yeah, that's that. I think the healing output for this character, the fact that this character buys a ton of actives like Scourge and stuff, I mean, I think this character is still like insane. I still rate this character extremely high. But I think with the changes, he definitely lowers a little bit. I might move this around a little bit more, but I think he sits around the A tier, at least for me right now. Maybe even S, but it's probably sitting around here. So moving on to 7. Now, when you look at 7, he still is, a decent pick rate. He still has a super high win rate, one of the highest win rates in the game, just like Drifter and whatnot. But I think this character is still inherently really good, probably A tier good. But I think a lot of people kind of mistake that they need this character to be the solo carry. I think that's where a lot of people get that messed up, is that he can't necessarily solo carry. He has to have another carry paired with him, so another M1, that being like a Venator or Warden. So I think putting 7 in the A tier is perfectly fine. I wouldn't necessarily put him S or BIS or anything, but I would definitely wouldn't put him B or C. To Shiv. So Shiv got a lot of changes. I'll cover both of them. So for Shiv, so when you look at it, at first it looks like a nerf, right? So you have ult fire damage now has a custom value per boon, so +2. So his ult, his ult fire got nerfed. I'm gonna look at both buffs. So Radiant Knife's cooldown went from 18 to 16, so this is a buff. Ult fire knockback movement is now disabled by slowing hex. This is a nerf. Slice and Dice now deals +25, not anymore because they rechanged it, but like I said, I'll look at it again. All this got changed again. The big thing that you want to be looking at is the Killing Blow now deals damage to troopers and neutrals along the way, and the Killing Blow executing a hero now instantly fills the rage bar. This is a big change, as well as its base ability now is that you instantly get the resets. This character went from a ultra, late game, mid game character to a snowball character, to where you want to get strong early and just maintain that strength. Because this character is a snowball, they have now that he gets his execute right away, which basically makes him, the snowball character. It allows you to continuously get a ton of kills and just maintain your current strength. Like I said, they did some more changes to this character. So if I go back and I look at this, see his alt fire ammo cost was reduced from 5 to 4. Weapon now has a fixed pellet spread. Slice and Dice is now back to Spirit. Slice and Dice damage increased from 60 to 75 damage, so they buffed his Slice and Dice. And the Killing Blow tier 3 was reduced from +10% enemy threshold to +8, so a slight nerf. Overall, this character is still the same. Shiv is still completely broken, and if you don't agree with me, that's perfectly fine, but there's just so many reasons to why this character is so strong. And I think a lot of people don't understand if, they say the character is weak or whatever. I think there's a lot of people don't understand why this character is so strong. A lot of it has to deal with the fact that, again, his Killing Blow now has to execute right away. It does a ton of damage. Yes, the ult fire and, Slice and Dice got nerfed or whatever. But you have to remember that the change they did more recently, this is inherently like a buff because Slice and Dice damage went up and it went back to spirit damage. or reducing, doing spirit damage and reducing spirit resist, you also keep the buffs that he originally got. So like with his ultimate, with his serrated knives, with the slice and dice in general. So this character is still super strong, and I still think will always remain at the top because of how bloodletting works, how his damage interacts, and a lot of different factors that make Shiv so good. Because he is still a character that is a frontliner tank, does a ton of damage, has a ton of movement, is inherently rather difficult to kill for the most part. But I think having the effect that now you can get a slowing hex for his alt fire is very nice, because his right click is considered a movement ability, which it always should be. But I think Shiv is always going to be a super strong character regardless of how they change the character, because of how bloodletting work, how his rage amplifies his damage, and everything like that. So probably sitting around the S tier, at least for me. So moving on to Silver. Silver didn't receive any changes this patch, but I think this character is still a very strong character. It's still one of the top characters in my opinion, because just how much damage you go from, you know, 0 HP essentially, or 1 HP to essentially 600 HP. Can pretty much self-sustain a lot of fights. You have a ton of movement. This character will always be strong until they change how much you HP from when you swap forms. So this character will always remain a super high impactful strong frontliner. I also want to whittle Sinclair into this mix. I think this character is a D tier / situational character, because it's another case with this Dynamo to where Sinclair has to be playing against characters to where his ultimate actually gets a lot of use. So you have to be playing against, a Lash, a Geist, a Rem, a 7, a Dynamo, those type of characters to where you get a ton of value. I think this character shines in a lot of those moments to where they can copy and they have all these other abilities, but I think this character struggles to get a lot of, just a lot of value if he's not playing against favorable ultimates, because inherently you have now 5 ultimates instead of 6, and if you're not playing against, good enough ultimates for Sinclair to copy, you're just losing an ultimate essentially, which is very bad, especially in this current meta to where people are just running around as 6 or running around as 5. If you don't have a character with an ultimate, or an ultimate that gets a lot of value because of what people are playing, this character, finds a lot of, trouble finding value. So I think putting this character D or situational is perfectly fine in my opinion. Moving on to Venator. I think Venator is still one of the top M1s, at least for this patch still. I think he's a character that can easily farm, get super ahead, and do a lot of damage. The crazy part is that he's down in towards the D tier with a low pick rate. Same with Mina, Rem, and Pocket. And you might be wondering, wow, these characters are terrible because they're so low. Well, you have to look at the pick rate. The reason why the pick rates are so low is because these characters are usually just getting permanently banned. And I think sometimes that they are getting let through, people don't know how to play them properly to get a lot of value. Like, this character is insane. This is probably one of the best M1s, or probably is the best M1 currently in the entire game in terms of just raw DPS damage carry. I think putting Venator in the S tier is perfectly fine, at least in my opinion. Moving on to Viktor. I think Viktor is pretty good. Again, he's in the B tier. He has a low pick rate with a high win rate. But the thing is, like, there's so many ways to shut down this character. Most of the people right now are building him Spirit, rushing Scourge, Infuser, and just trying to go for the max sustain. But just like always, trying to shut down this character and forcing a side laner or a position 2 character like a Mina, a Mirage to constantly focus down on Viktor and not let this character get any value is really good. However, a lot of people don't really see that. And I think this character sits around the B tier, maybe like leveraging between A and C. The character can be useful in a lot of different situations, but I think putting him in the B tier is at least perfectly fine. In terms of the changes, like I said, the health per boon went down. I don't think overall this character really received any changes from the recent patch, no. So I think, like I said, probably sits around, not amazing, not horrible, but all right, in a decent spot. So that looks fine to me. Moving on to Vindicta. So again, Vindicta is good in my opinion, but again, it's another one of those, situational picks to where she has to be a good pick. And I think, again, like I've been stating, the health per boon reduced by 5%. That going down makes her ultimate a lot better because people have less max HP, meaning she can get a lot more consistent ultimates or a lot more consistent executes with her ultimate, allowing her to stack. And again, she's another one of those characters that infinitely stack. You also have a pretty big buff to where you have the stake change, Quarrel Familiar, whatever. But you have this Assassinate max bonus damage spirit scaling increase from 2 to 2.3, which is a pretty big buff. Even though it's by 0.3, it's still insanely big. So this character rises a lot in terms of my stocks, but I think the issue is in matchmaking, this normal MM, when there's no draft system, picks or bans, this character struggles to get a lot of value because you can't ban certain characters that would just steamroll this character, like characters like Calico or other characters that just jump on top of her. But in a scrim sitting in Night Shift and other organized events, you can ban the issues for this character. But because of the fact that you can't ban the issues, the character definitely is not in the best spot from a matchmaking perspective or normal MM. So I put her in just the okay spot. I think she's not necessarily terrible, not necessarily good, but she's alright. She's useful in a lot of different situations. But I think for right now, I'm putting her in the Viscous. So I think Viscous got some changes. Tier 3 Splatter Spirit scaling was reduced from 1.1 to 1.0. He still does a ton of damage. Put a Punch Tier 3 increase from -12 to -14. Goo Ball Tier 3 increase from +6 to +7 duration. I think this character is very good. I think this character does a lot of damage. He's a very useful support. He builds splatter damage, and then you can pivot into a support, which makes the character super adaptable and a super hybrid character. Does a lot of damage, can do a lot for his team. I think overall is a really good pick. If the enemy team has a Rem and you have a Viscous on your team, it's going to be a fairly even match because he offers a lot that Rem has. He just has more damage than healing, whereas Rem has more healing than damage. His utility is, relatively even because of Cube. It's so useful in so many situations. But he does have a lot of abilities that, are a little bit selfish. For instance, his Goo Ball is selfish because it only affects himself, whereas Rem, his ultimate, affects the enemy team, sleeps the enemy team, so it's a little bit not as selfish because, you have the ability to save yourself and save your team with the sleep, whereas Goo Ball is a selfish ultimate. You're just playing for yourself. But I still think it's super useful to rotate around the map and help your team out, to be able to cube. I think just Cube and Splatter are such great abilities that it's hard for this character to be placed anywhere lower than A tier, at least in my opinion. So that's probably what I'm thinking. Now, Vyper. Again, because the health boons went down, because you have Lethal Venom, the poison, for secondary ability, I think it's easier for her to get kills early. And it's another case where she's a snowball character. If she gets kills early and she dominates the early game, her trajectory is essentially like you get a kill, then you get another kill, and then you just pivot. Because the character, once you start rolling on this character, just like Shiv or any of these snowballing characters like Calico, it's just this character gets a tremendous amount of value. So I think this character sits around the A tier at least, in my opinion. I think Bola, her ultimate, is still super useful in a lot of different situations. She's just a good M1, but I think the issue is you have a lot of characters that shut down this character relatively easy. But I think this character still gets a lot of value, even if you're playing against said characters. Also, I want to add Warden. I think Warden got some small changes, but again, because the health per boon went down, the character like Warden, like Venator, because they inherently have so much HP, are this better overall. So the bullet damage per boon was reduced from 0.34 to 0.28. Then Warden willpower tier increase in from -22 to -24, a slight nerf. But the willpower tier 3 increased from 2.5 spirit power scaling to 2.7, so you build them ult more focused now, which is perfectly fine, and you can still build them more of an M1 as well. I think this character is still a really good M1, so you probably put it at the B or A tier at least for me. Moving on to Wraith Yamato. So Wraith, I don't think is that good. I think you just have so many other characters that do her job way better. You have Venator, you have Warden, you have Vyper, you have Mirage, you have Infern, you have all these, you have Geist, you have all these characters that just do Wraith's job a lot better. Yes, sometimes when you're playing a match and you're against a Wraith, she's super strong, super ahead, she can easily dominate game, but that can be said for a lot of different characters. If pretty much any character is super far ahead, they can easily take over a game. I think this character is a pub stomping character, an MM stopping character, but I think in terms of actual matches, like Night Shift and scrims and higher organized defense, the character struggles to get any value because you only have her TP, and usually you just like run at her and she just falls over. I think there's a lot of characters in the meta right now that do that job of running over a Wraith, running over a Vindicta and such on, that's hard for her to get any value, at least for me. Now Yamato, I think Yamato's decent. She's another one of those snowbally characters like Shiv and like, you know, like Calico, like that, to where she has to get strong early and just maintain that strength. If she doesn't get strong early, she tends to fall off quite hard, or it's really hard for her to get into the game. However, she does do a lot of damage, and I think her ultimate that cleanses all abilities, because you're playing against characters that have, you know, poison, burn, scarabs, marks, Mina. You have all these characters that can be pretty annoying to deal with. I think Yamato is in a decent spot, but for the most part, you have characters like Silver, you know, like Shiv, that essentially do Yamato's job, but just a little bit better. So I think putting her in a respectable like B position is fine in my opinion. But yeah, this is kind of what I'm thinking from a Rogance. Now I actually want to go through and just rearrange some things. Okay, so rearranging this. So best in slot. So I want to do one Spirit Nuker, one Frontliner, one M1, one support. So I think your best Spirit Nuker right now, probably Calico. Your best Frontliner right now is probably Shiv. I'm just moving this up, essentially. I think your best M1 is Ven. And I think your best support is probably still Rem. I think in terms of between Bis and S, you have characters. I think Abrams is a really strong contender in the S tier category. I think Mirage is a very strong contender for the S tier category. I think in terms of power ranking from left to right, this is kind of what it looks like. I think Billy is one of the best A ranks. I would move Doorman over. I would move Drifter over. Celeste would probably be on my lowest of the A tier. I think Dynamo would be Viscous, because I think Viscous is really strong. Then I think it would go to Talon, because Talon is inherently strong all the time. Then Holiday. I think Geist is really strong. Lash is always good in my opinion. Mina, that's fine. I think Mina's really good, especially with the changes to the health. Then I would probably go Silver. Then I would probably go Warden. Then I would go Vyper. Then I would 7. Then I would go Celeste. For B tier, I'd go Infernus, probably. Then I would go Ivy. Then I would go Mo. Then I would go Paige. Then maybe Yamato. Viktor. Apollo. I'd put Vin over Paradox. C tier. That's whatever. Situational. Then we have F tier. This is what I'm thinking. And when I say best, I'm thinking best in slot. So again, Spirit Nuker is like a category or a role, I would say. Then you have your like your frontliner / hybrid character. Then you have like your M1. So your position 1 character, your M1, most DPS. So I think in terms of the M1 category, in that category, you have Ven. I wouldn't say Mirage, because Mirage is like a position 2 character. You're not really building like raw carry for the most part. So you have Ven, you have Geist, Warden, Wraith in that M1 position. So I think in terms of the M1, I think he's the best. I think Rem in terms of support is like really up there. I think it's between Rem and Viscous as the best. It's essentially, with Rem you have a lot more utility, but with Viscous you have the cube and you have a lot more damage. So it's just damage versus utility, essentially, these two. And that's probably all I would do. I know Shiv can be seen as another Spirit Nuker, but I think Shiv is just way too good not to play. I think he's a super high priority character that even in Night Shift and even in scrims is always like one of the highest picked characters right away. They're pick ban for the most part from a lot of scrims I've been watching recently. So that's probably what I'm thinking right now. Like I said, you can either agree with my tier list or disagree. Tier lists are mainly just a way to start conversations and talk about the game for the most part. So my opinion could be completely different from your own, which is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. But that's probably what I'm thinking. You can let me know what you think in the comments down below, if you would move anybody or whatnot. Like I said, this video is for fun. If you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out all the other socials. But anyways, I hope you have a great and safe day, and I'll catch you in the next one.